All right, let's begin. Thank you all for joining. So I guess, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be designing and building an Express app from scratch. So this is where we are starting from, an empty directory. Right? So we have an empty directory, and we're going to try to go all the way to building an app, which is, I think I'm going to go with like a blogging application maybe. So having an ability to create a blog and then add comments to the posts. So in order to do that, I'm going to go with the stuff we spoke about yesterday, which is how do we go about, like, where do we begin, right? So the steps that I'm going to be writing some stuff down in my README. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a README file. So let's write some specs, right? So I'm not going to have any authentication. It's going to be a simple app. I should be able to create a blog post. I should be able to go to the / page and see all blog posts sorted by created at. Right, so I should be able to add a comment to. I should be able to view all comments. All right, so let's start with these 4 specs. So I don't know if I have it written down, but like the process that I'd like to go about implementing this is like, problem decomposition. Is thinking about, identify all nouns in my specs. So in this case, my noun would be post, and I would have a comment. Right? Let's do this. Once I have that, I'm going to build relationships between so 1:1 or 1:many or many to many. So essentially, a post to comment is one post can have many comments. Right? A comment cannot belong to many posts because that doesn't make sense. Because the specs basically are essentially telling me that I should be able to add a comment to a blog post, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it. So the relationship part is easy. And step 3, build a schema for I guess nouns and relationships. So I'm gonna create like some sort of directory structure here. So right now I don't have anything other than a README file. So I'm gonna create a source directory, and I'm going to create a models directory. I'm going to create a DB directory. Right, so now if I have a look at that, now I have source models DB. Right, and inside my source models DB, I'm going to create my schema.sql. So now if I look at my folder structure, I have an empty file for my schema. Right, so this is where I'm going to add my schema. Source models DB schema. All right, so what do we do in our schema? So let's drop table posts if exists. And then we do the same for comments. Right, so now I want to create my table. So create table posts. So ID is serial. And then I would like to have a title for my post. Let's have a text and also have a body for my post, which is also text. And then I will have a created at, which is a date time object. And then I'm going to have an updated at, which is also a date time object. So the idea is that I want to essentially have like tracked when my post was created and when my post was updated, right? And like because it's you know, the moment I create something is essentially the moment I create something, I want the created at to be set to the current time, so I can add like a default value for this. And essentially, Postgres gives you functions for like managing time. So Postgres default. So I think there's a function called now. So it gives you the current time right now, and it sets that value to now. So think about like when I create a post, I just want the created at value to be set to now, right? So current date. Yeah, so default now. Okay. Default now. Actually, let's make this timestamp. This is probably better. So let's look at Postgres timestamp. So timestamp essentially contains time zone as well, and by default time zone is set to the time zone of your machine. Right, so we are in PST, so it's going to be specific. So this is kind of things where things get a little confusing, is because the time, if you save it on your local Postgres, your time is going to be time zone is going to be different than if you save it like on Heroku, because the Heroku all computers that run on the cloud are set to UTC, which is like a different time zone. So which is why when you're doing like date computations, you always have to ensure that the dates that you're comparing are in the same time zone. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense to compare dates with different time zones. So the other option is to save things as timestamp values, and timestamp values are always in UTC. So then there's no possibility of concern, but then you have to pay the additional cost of like converting it to time objects or date objects. Anyway, so let's do the other table, which is comments. So I have the same thing. I have a serial, but now since I have a 1:many relationship with a post, I need to have a post ID here, right? Which is an integer. And the comment for now, let's give it like a username maybe, which is let's say 100, and the body is text. And then we do the same thing with created at and updated at.
This is like top on line 7.
On line 7, yeah, thank you. Okay, so now we have our schema developed. Right, so now we've essentially completed steps 1, 2, 3. So step 4 would be, so I'm going to try to skip like some of the steps where I need to like build scripts like and add stuff to package.json, but I'm going to skip a little ahead and say like I need to identify all verbs in my specs. Verbs are associated with the nouns. Right, so that means that, oops, so if I have a post, right? So for my post, what are the verbs associated for it? So create. I can create a post. So right now it's not in the specs. I'm just looking at my specs. Right. So my specs just say I should be able to create a blog post. I should be able to view posts. So view all. Right. So I should be able to view all posts sorted by create that. And then the other two are for comments. Right. So that for the post I only have create and view all. So and then for a comment, I have I should be able to create a comment, and then I should be able to view a comment for a blog post. Right, so it's find by post ID, essentially. Right? Everyone with me so far? Okay. Cool. So let's do some npm init here. So let's create a package.json. Express app scratch. Entry point is source/server.js. Don't care about the test command. So now I have a package.json with some stuff in it, and let's create a db create command, right? And I want to like decide what the name of my database is, and usually I like to put the environment name in the database. So I would say create db express scratch app development. Right, so like the development is the environment database. So okay, and then db init dev. We're also, so now I kind of have to like execute the SQL against a certain database. Right, so psql -d this and source models db schema.sql. I created my specs in my description. Actually, this is a blog post, right? So blogging. So let's actually rename this to that because this is kind of weird. So blogging. Right, so let's run some commands. So we can say npm run db create dev. There's a missing comma here. Cool, so that got created. And then let's do the other one, which is init dev. Oh yeah, so how do I drop a table if it exists? Drop table if it exists.
That whole thing goes before the table.
Oh, I see. Cool. So the issue was that I needed to pipe the file into the command. Because here, or I could actually say -f. So -f is a flag that you can give to the psql command that says use this file. Anyway, let's see if it works. Right. So the command I executed was this one. So -d is like which database I want to use, and -f is like a file that I want to give the psql command to read and then execute against this database. Okay, so now we have some sort of some tooling to kind of set up our database, right? So that's good. So the next thing that I want to do is add some database functions. Okay, so let's go back to our README. So I have identified these verbs. So the 5 would be write database functions for all verbs identified in step 4. And so now I need to write database functions for post and comment. So I essentially need to create these files inside my Can you ask them to like keep back? No worries. So if you go into our models directory, we right now have nothing, right? And our database directory has only schema. So let's go into the DB directory and create some files. So I need a file for posts and I need a file for comments. Right, so these are the two things that we identified here, 2 resources. So we need a file for post and comments, and those files would contain these functions. So let's start with posts. So I definitely need a way to connect to my Postgres database. Right now I have no way to do that. So I need to have some sort of a DB connection, right? So which gives me some sort of a, some sort of a connection object. So this needs to be done, right? So this is a database functions, but maybe 5.1 is add pg promise as a dependency. Then add a way to connect to Postgres using pg promise. Right, so we need these 2 things in order to be able to write a database function. Because right now we have no way of connecting to Postgres database. So let's do an npm install -s pg promise.
Minus S is save.
Right. So it basically modifies your package JSON and adds the dependencies to the file. So right now, if you look at our package JSON, it has no dependencies, right? So now it's changed it to add feature files. Okay. So inside my DB folder, I'm actually going to create a file called connection.js. It's probably a better name. Right. So it's my connection. So let's look at the PG promise documentation to see how we could connect to PG promise.
I wanted to jump on it.
It's built on top of Node Postgres. Oh, what? See the official documentation. Thank you. Alright, so init options. So we did npm install PG promise. We need to do something like this. So let's look at what initialization options are. Gotcha. So these are like different things that we can pass to Postgres. But anyway, we don't really need to change any of this. We can use the default connections. So we can just say, const PGP equal to require PG promise, right? And then execute the function. So once we have that, then we say this, and then const connection is some sort of an object, right? So I usually like to give it an object rather than a string, just because it looks nicer and you have more control. So I would give it a host is so right now it's being hard-coded. It's probably not a good idea to hard-code it like this. Like we would probably want to like add a configuration where it's right from the configuration. So you would potentially have something like config.db.host in the future. But let's, for simplicity's sake, let's like add hard-coded values. Support is 5432. Database, because even the database name would be different based on which environment you're in, right? So right now it is blogging scratch development. Usually it would be config.db.database, right? Or name or something. Actually, database, yeah, database is fine. Actually, no, name is better. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So we just need to give these three values. and we just module.exports the DB. Right, so now we have a connection object which we can use to make queries against our database. So in our posts, let's do a simple thing where we say db.query select star from posts, and then do a .then. We get some posts back, and let's console.log our posts. Right, so if we do this, I can run. Oops. So I can say node posts. So we get back an empty object. I mean, empty array, right? Because there are no posts in our system. So that means I'm able to at least connect to my database. So a good way to test that. Right. So now we need to make functions based on our README, right? So what did our README say? So our README said, oops, not this. README. Yeah. Okay, so we need to have a function to create a post. Right, so I would have to write a function called create, which takes a post, right? And I say db.query insert into posts. So the columns that I want to use are what? The body, the title and the body. Right, a post has a title and a body, and then I want to give it values. So PG promise has this nice ability to say title and body, and I can just pass in the object. So this is sort of, actually let's look at where this comes from. This is kind of like destructuring syntax that you can use. But maybe it's supposed to be like $title actually. Yeah. This is like destructuring syntax that you can use, but I may be wrong. So PG promise gives you a way to so the common for mistakes, PG promise. That's the common mistake that people make.
Oh.
And I think it's called name parameter. Right. So it's gotcha. So it is. I was doing it the right way. Okay. So what basically this is saying is there's two ways for me to do this. I can either do this, right, or I can do this, right, and then I can pass in post.body and post.title, or the other way around, title and post.body. Right, there are essentially two ways. So this is usually how folks have been doing this, and one of the issues with this is that now I have to think about whether my order is correct. Right, like if I have a bug here where I was passing the body first and a title, it would be weird. Like now the title would have my body and my body would have my title, and even though this may work, it's a logical bug. It isn't a syntactical bug. Right, it's like something that you've because of like the ordering, it has inserting wrong data into the table. But you can avoid those kind of bugs if you use this syntax, which is it's trying to instead of passing it an array, we are passing it an object. So post is an object, and then it automatically figures out that there's a key on the object called title and there's a key on the object called body. And that's a little bit more obvious because $1 doesn't tell me what it is. I have to look at $1 and I have to look at this, right? Which is like I have to do this sort of manual comparison to see, is the first position the body or the title? But if I directly just specify the key, then I just it's much easier. There's nothing more for me to see. So I also recommend doing this because then it's just less overload and overhead on your brain, which is just indicating what is the key in the object that you want to replace at this point.
Regardless of the order.
I mean, the ordering still matters. I could still make a mistake of putting the title after the body, right? I could do this, but at least I can just look at oh, the first one is title and the second one is body. So it's much closer. But over here, there were 3 things now I had to compare. So I've reduced 3 things down to just 2 things. So even though there's still that comparison that has to happen, but at least I'm reducing the number of comparisons.
You say that's called destructuring? Is it?
Yeah. So think about what's happening here too, right? $1 and $2. It's figuring out is the first position and the second position in this array. So under the hood, it's replacing $1 and 2 with the first value of the array and the second value of the array. And this is the slightly different where it's looking at the key instead of looking at the position. It's trying to do an object lookup. Yeah. Okay. So if we have that, so maybe we can say returning star, right? So if I do a returning star, I get back whatever I inserted. So I get back the post. I get back actually post because it always gives me back an array, right? And then I can say return posts of 0. So I want the first one back. Also, I want to have some sort of catch. I want to say console.error, do some sort of error logging here saying that post error while executing post.create, and then I want to rethrow the error. And I want to return this. I need to return the promise. Okay, so now I have a function to create a post. I need to also have a function to view all posts. So I'm going to say view all. So it doesn't take any argument. And then I would say return db.query. Select start from posts where I'll just select start from posts, right? So an order by created at descending, right? I want to order reverse. And then do the same thing. So console.error while executing posts. Excuse me. Okay. So now that we have these 2 functions, we want to export these 2 functions. So module.exports is going to be create and view. Right? All right, so now we have finished like step 5. So notice that I'm only doing, so I'm not going to spend time doing comment just yet, because I want to like have one sort of full cycle of one resource in my system. So in this case, I'm just focusing on post right now. Right? I want to be able to create a post, and I want to be able to view all posts. Right? And build the API and then build the views associated to all of that. And if I have all of that working, at least I'll have a model thing working, and then I can use that model to then build comments, right? Instead of like doing the comments right now. So I'm going to then say, use express to build the routes for viewing all posts. So let's start with this one. So using Express to build routes. So in that we have to install Express as a dependency, right? I have to install. What are the other things? I guess we only need Express. We don't need body parser yet because it's only going to be viewing all the posts. So it's only a get route, right? So create a get route for localhost /posts, which lists posts, right? And then create a view. Like let's use EJS. So install express, EJS as dependency. Create an EJS template for posts. Okay. So let's do that. So I need to say npm install express.
Do you ever do it together? Like express and then EJS, like multiple?
You mean like I can say comma, like two things at a time?
Or space, yeah.
It's good. I don't know. Let's see. Maybe it's working. Yeah. Okay, cool. So while that's happening, let's create a server.js file. So server.js file is the entry point, right? If you remember our package JSON, we basically said our main file is server, source server. Also, let's install a dev dependency NoDaman. So let's do npm I, what is it, save dev NoDaman. So anyone tell me what this main does? Right, it's the entry point into your app. So if I just hit NoDaman and enter, it's going to look for what is my main file, and then it's going to execute that main file automatically. I don't explicitly have to say NoDaman source server. Okay, so if I have my Express app, I'm going to say const app is require Express, and then I'm going to say app.listen. What is the documentation for Express? Express.js. I think it takes a function or a string or something. Let's see. Or just a port number. Okay. So app.listen, let's make it 3000 by default. Or let's say port is equal to process.port or 3000. And let's have a simple route. That just says
Online, what, do you do it like that, or do you have to call Express first to invoke?
You have to
invoke, oh, listening? Okay. Oh, app is Express. Okay, gotcha. Okay. So, NoDaman. Wait, what did I? Yeah. $2,000 is in use. So notice it automatically did this, right? Because our main said that this was a file. Okay, so now what happens? So let's do a curl localhost 3. Smart. Okay, so I got back logger. Right? 200. So it's working. So let's for organization's sake, let's organize our. Whoops, that's not what I want to do this. Okay, so now we have models, DB, and server, right? So I'm going to create a directory called source server routes. Right, so now I'm going to go into source. So if I do that, I can then create specific routes for my different resources in my system. So I'm going to say touch server routes index.js. So that's going to be the entry point into the routes module. And then I'm also going to create one for posts.js. Right, so let's go into source server routes index. Cool. So now I'm going to say const posts is require /posts. So which is essentially this file, which is empty right now. It doesn't have anything. And I'm also going to say const router is require express router. So I'm going to create a new router, and I'm going to say module.export equal to router. Right, and I want to add some stuff to this router. So I would say router.use /posts is what? Is posts. Right, so all the routes that are in my posts file get added to this router with a prefix of posts. Right, so this is the prefix I'm going to be adding. And in my posts file, I need to define some routes now. So my router is going to create a new router, express.router. I'm going to say router.use / right? So if I go back to my README, I basically need to create a route called /posts, right? But /posts is already the prefix. So the route here would just be /, right? So it would router.get /. And now I have request, response, next. So here I need to do what? I need to render all the posts. Right? I need to send back posts. So I need to do some sort of a database call to fetch my posts. So we have a way to talk to our database, right? So we have DB and we have posts. But one thing that I do like to create is like an abstraction for my database, which is I don't want to directly talk to my database, because I don't want people to know, or rather I don't want my route functions to even know that the database exists, which is why I prefer having this folder called models. And in here, I'm going to create another file for posts and comments. So I'm going to say touch models posts.js, touch models comments.js. So now if you look at this, I have comments and posts, right? So this posts is going to just delegate stuff. So you have posts, going back to, oops. So this is my db posts function. So I need to require this db posts function in here, right? So my db becomes require db/posts. And then I would just say module.exports is create becomes db.create, and view all becomes db.view all. And then additional functions that operate on posts data will be defined here. Right?
So it's mostly just like additional middleware stuff.
Not even middleware, but mostly like functions which operate on the posts data. So think about like if there's some function which is transforming the data, or like filtering some kinds of posts, or adding some, doing some computations on posts. Like that's the logic of your application, right? Your application may have some complicated logic that it needs to do on the data that it gets from the database. Those kind of functions would live here.
So this file wouldn't have any actual like database calls. It would just be expecting like an array of objects and then manipulating.
Right. It would just delegate to the database file to get the data. Right. So think about it like something like got a function top posts, and it just it could do something like db dot find. It's actually FindAll is a better name than view all. FindAll dot then posts, and then it could do something like posts dot filter post post dot viewed count greater than 1,000, some sort of logic here, right? But it's doing some stuff and it's returning this. So top posts now has like some logic that it uses, but it still uses the DB maybe to get the posts. Or it could be like some sort of an immutable function which just takes in the posts, and then you don't need to have the actual DB call. So both of them are okay. The other use case that I like to think of it is like, imagine like in the case of when you're creating a user, and when you need to encrypt the user's password, the encryption would happen here, and then the encrypted password would go down to the DB function. Right? So like imagine you had create here, and this had like username and password. So here you could use something like decrypt. For those of you who have used decrypt, I don't know what it's called. Is it create or hash or something? Yeah, hash. And you hash the password, and then you get back a hashed password. And then with the hashed password, you pass it down to the function. So db.create, and then you pass down username and hashed password. So essentially, the database layer has no information about what the data contains. It doesn't know if the database is hashed or not hashed. It just knows that I'm getting some data and I'm saving it. That's the job of the database, to just save stuff and find use and look up stuff and update stuff. It doesn't care about what the data is. That what it is comes from the model layer. Okay, this is kind of a tangent, but it's a good.
It's a great tangent.
Okay, so we don't even need this top post function, right? So now we have db create and db view all. So I'm going to change this to find all. View all is a weird name.
Give it
Line 14.
Thank you. Okay, so going back to our controller, now we can require our posts to be dot slash, where are we? 1, 2 down, models posts, right? So now we can require this file on the right, and then we can say posts.findAll then we get back some posts. And let's do something simple, which is response.json posts. So we just send posts back as a JSON, right? We are skipping the creating the EJS template for now, because I just want to see if it works. So because my database has nothing in it, I would expect to get back just an empty array, right? So let's see if that happens. So if I say curl localhost 3000/posts, it says I cannot get posts. Whoops. Wah, wah, wah.
Is that right? Like over there, post that FindAll, or is it post that view all?
No, I changed it to FindAll. Right? We changed it a second ago. So it's not throwing an error. It's just saying that it's just saying it cannot get posts.
I see.
And that's probably because our server doesn't have the route defined. That we haven't added. So we have only this route defined. We haven't imported our router here. So we have to say routes is require server/routes. Thank you. And then we can get rid of this route. And we can just say app.use routes.
So it was on line 2 to like server.routes.
Line 2? Oh, yeah. Okay. So we're getting an error, right? So somewhere on line 4 in our routes index, we are not getting a router back. So let's see what's on server routes index 4. So server routes index 4, we are not getting back. So posts is not what we expect. Right, because we're not exporting anything in this file. So we need to say module.exports equal to router. Cool, so that started. So the error is gone. So now let's make a call. So posts.findAll is not a function. Very good. So we have an error where we are getting posts.findAll is not.
Because you have it actually mapped to view all.
Oh, I see. Okay, so that makes sense. So this has to be changed to FindAll. Cool. So now we get back an empty array, right, as expected. So any questions so far? Good? Okay, so we now want to create some views. Actually, let's do something here. So let's add, what is the name of our database, if you remember?
Logging Scratch.
Logging Scratch development. Cool. So if you notice that we have some couple of tables in here, I'm just going to insert some data in here. So insert into posts, title and body, values, hello. All right, so let's do this. Right, so we have that. So now we get back an actual object, right, an array. And notice that our created add and updated add values are automatically populated to the current time, which is 17, 24, 27. So that's actually not the current time zone. So this is UTC because it's 5:27 somewhere UTC world. Okay.
The console translates it differently as well.
Oh, really? So if I say date here, no, I get the current time. So I think Postgres has its own time. So if I go to now, so select right now. Oops. No, actually, it still has that. Oh, that's weird. Okay. So going back to what we were going to do, which was adding a templating engine. So we want to add a templating engine here. So app.view, is it? Oh, app.set. So template app.engine. Registers the template engine. No, I wonder if you can do this. Oh, I see. Wait a sec. To map the EGS template engine to HTML files. No, that's not what I want to do.
Is it like just an upset view engine EGS?
Right. So I remember doing something like that. So app.set view, is it?
View engine.
Like that?
I think it's one word.
And EGS.
Okay. And then I need to say app.set and set the path, right? Views, is it, or view? Okay, let's look at some other project. View space engine and views. Okay, so this essentially needs like the path to the folder which contains all your view files. So dir name is the current directory, and I'm going to put it inside source views. So current directory, I'm already in source, so I just have to give it views. So, but I don't have that folder yet, so I need to say mkdir views. Right, so now I have a folder called views. And then I'd like to organize my view folder also based on the different tables that I have. So inside my view folder, I'm going to create posts, and I'm going to create comments. And then inside of posts, I'm going to say, I guess the index page, index.ejs. So now if you look at the folder, I have model server and views, and then I have a file called index.ejs. And this file is going to be used to render the list of all posts, like FindAll. So instead of doing a JSON, I would do something like render post/index, and I would say posts is posts, right? So in my index file, I can then use posts. So views posts index. All the great posts here, right? And so let's see if this even gets rendered. Cool. So I get all the great posts. So at this point, I can do some sort of iterate through each of the posts and render some HTML for each post, right? Because I could have 5 posts, I could have 50 posts, I could have 100 posts. So I don't want to repeatedly go through each of them individually. I just want like some sort of a automated way to just render all the posts that I have. So a good thing for this is a for each function, right? So I can say posts.for. I don't know why this thing kind of dot here to fix my Emacs for EJS. Posts.for each. I get a post. So I get a post, and then so now I need to do, so I forget if there are partials in EJS. So EJS. So I want to create a partial for just rendering a single post. So that way I'm abstracting the logic for a single post. So usually I like to name my partials with an underscore that indicates that it's a partial. So if I go into views, so I'm going to say touch views posts underscore post dot EJS.
You don't have a folder for partials.
Yeah, because it's a partial related to this specific thing,
Sure.
it's in here. But if it's like common partials, then I would put it inside like the top level. All right, so this is an example, but how do I see? Oh, I see here. This dot partial. What is that?
You can also do like include, and then the file name that would work as well.
And then I can pass in data to that file because I need to pass in the post.
Should be able to.
What is the syntax? Includes. No. Docs. What's going on? The site is broken. So let's see, EJS documentation partials. It's crazy how Stack Overflow is like the thing. Right, so we do this, but then how do I pass in like data to this file? EJS includes. Okay, I guess GitHub will have some documentation. Include user show, but then how is it passing the user in there? Okay, that's weird. Maybe it's magically available. So I would say something like includes post slash post. And then in my underscore post, let's say post dot title. Right, so let's say I had this. Let's go to localhost 2000 / posts. Error.
I think it's just include, not includes.
Cannot find include file. That's interesting. So includes are relative to the template. Oh, I see. So I don't have to provide the posts. So just include relative to the current file. Missing posts index. Oh yeah. Oops. Localhost 2000 posts. All right, cool. Okay, so essentially all that's feels super weird. Like all these variables are just available inside of this without having to explicitly pass it. Kind of weird, but okay, let's go with it. And then let's also put the body in here, which is post.body. All right, so now we have a way to, let's actually add another post in our database. Okay. So cool. So that means we can now style it, and we can put some divs in here, and maybe paragraph. Right, so things are getting a little better. Maybe we don't need a paragraph for both of these, and this could just be like spans. This would be a bit. Okay, it looks the same. Never mind. Okay, so you can work on like styling, but essentially you want to like use partials to make to make your code dry. So let's work on like another route, which is to create a post. So I'm going to be RESTful, which is going to have a route which has method type post. It takes a request and response. And I need a function called posts.create, which takes a post And I don't know where the post comes from, so I guess it comes in the body. So we get request dot params dot body. Sorry, request dot body. Create post dot then we get back a post. Right. So once we have a post, what do we want to do? We want to maybe redirect them to the post page. So actually, you know what? Before doing this, let's create a post detail page, which is ID. Post.find by ID would be request.params.id. Then we get a post back. Response.render post. You can try this, and then post is post. 15. Oh yeah, thank you. So we need to create this function find by ID, right? So if we go to our DB posts, we have a find all, but we don't have a find ID. So let's just like copy this, create a find by ID, which takes in an ID as an argument, and this just changes to where ID equal to $1. ID. Oh yeah, let's also change this to. Actually, you know what? I think anyway, never mind. We can potentially get the name of this function, but that's out of the scope of this. But cool. So we get the find by ID when we return the posts that we get. So because this is going to return back a list of posts, I actually want to only give me back the first one. So I would say posts of 0. So that way I always get the single post. Otherwise it would always give me back an array, and then I have to do the posts of 0 in the router. And I don't want to do that, so I just do it here. Okay, so then I need to export this and by ID. My models, I need to export it as well. And now it's available to me to use. Right, so let's see, can I go to post/1? Nice, again, right? So that means that when I create a post, I can then response dot redirect to /post/post/post.it when I create a post, right? So how do I make this happen? I need to, since I'm making a post request, I will need some sort of a body parser, right? And I don't have body parser, so I need to install body parser. And then in my server, I need to use body parser, right? So I say body parser is require body parser. So we need to use the body parser before we actually initialize our routes, because it's a middleware that needs to happen before, right? So I would say app.use body parser.json. But is it JSON? Actually, no. It's going to be a form submission, right? So I would have to do, maybe you can leave this, but also do the other one, which is like form. What is it? It's kind of a, But is it just like body parser.url encoded?
And then you pass it like extended, like an object that has extended true or false.
Gotcha. That
But usually false.
it's usually false. I want some extension though. I like extensions. Okay, so is this it? So let's see if we got any errors. Okay, cool. So in order to create a post, I will need a form, right? And I need also another route to render the new post page. So I need /new, right? And this would just do like response.render post/new. And I need to create the view file for that new.ejs. Right? So this would be like, oops. Create a new post. And then we would have a form. The method would be post. The action would be /posts, right? Because we want to post to this route. And then we would have the title and an input field. I forget, do we put a /input in input? Do we have a closing input? Or we can, so you can close it here directly? Okay. So the name would be title, and the type would be, was it text box? Is it text box?
Yes.
Is it just text? No, it's text area and text something else. Is it text box? I forget. Can someone Google that? And then I would have a body, and my input would be name. It would be the body, and type would be text area. It's just text? Okay. So post new, I get some error. Invalid input for integer new. So can someone tell me why this is breaking? So this route is not working.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true too. Get, okay. No, it's still breaking. Invalid input syntax for integer new. So it's trying to execute find by ID and trying to find a post with ID new. So what do I need to do to fix it?
Move that gap route before the ID.
Right. So this route was being triggered because it was ahead in the order. So it was finding this, it was thinking new is an ID. So I need to put the new, more specific routes above the generic routes. So now if I do that, I get this. Okay. Why is this not a text area though?
A text what?
Area? I thought text area makes it like,
Bigger box.
yeah. Maybe I need to put like styling on it to make it bigger. And then I also need a submit button, right? Submit. Oops. So, okay. So let's console log.
And text area seems to be like an HTML tag itself.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. My bad?
Yeah. And you can have like rows or columns.
Gotcha. Okay. That's fine. I can just like increase the size of this. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's like console log the body just to know, or the post just to know what we're getting. Right, so when I submit the form, so I'll say hello, hi, and create. So we get the title as hello and the body as hi. Cool. So title is not defined. So what is actually happening is we are trying to, because this is template literals, it's trying to evaluate this as a template literal because it has the same syntax as a template literal. So I need to remove it and make it a regular string. Did everyone get that?
Yeah, and can you still keep the $sign?
Right. So the $sign body is used internally by the PG promise library to do that. But if I use backticks, the JavaScript like tries to evaluate it as template literals, and it's like, oh, I don't understand title and body.
Is that kind of a pain though? Because now the whole, like, if you have a long SQL statement, it's all going to be on one line. But you have to break, you have to state the lines now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. You can you can escape it with a slash.
Yeah, but it's just like a pain.
Wait, so we wanted to break that. You could say, could you use a slash?
Yeah.
Oh.
You can put a new line and put in a slash. Confirm resubmission. All right. So it worked. So one thing that we have not done here is do any error handling on our routes. Right? Notice that if some database goes down, what would happen? So let's stop our Postgres. Brew services, stop Postgres. Okay, what do you think is going to happen now?
It's going to throw an error, and then it's going to render the error on the page.
What is going to throw an error?
When you try to call a function to connect that requires connecting with Postgres.
Okay, so would we get back a response, or would you think this? Would we get back a response saying an error happened on the page?
What if it just hangs?
I'm asking you whether it would hang or whether you would get back a response.
It would still, you would still get back a response because you're not affecting the server at all. You're just affecting the call to the database.
Okay, so how many people think you get back a response? You said yes, so you should raise your hand. And then, okay, 2. How many people think it'll hang? Cody and Jay. Okay, that's the test of time. Yeah, it's gonna hang because all your promise was rejected, and there's an unhandled promise rejection, and your response, it's not going to the render at all. Right, your rendering is not happening, and because the promise happens on in a different point in time, and that's throwing an error, there's no way to get back to the original place, which is why it's hanging. So what do we do to fix it? We need some sort of an error handler. So going back to our server, or actually our routes. Let's go to our routes index. So ideally, we should create some middlewares that will help us with error handling. So I'm going to create a file, server middlewares.js. Right? And server, oops, this is not the file I wanted. Yeah. So I would say const error So error handler functions in Express takes 4 arguments. So they're different than middlewares because the first argument is an error. Request, response, and next. And what we do is we essentially render response.render, and then we should have some sort of an error page. And then let's pass the error. Pass the error as a value to our view file, right? Yeah. And then we say module.exports equal to error handler. So now in our routes index file, we need to use this error handler, right? And usually error handlers come right at the end because it's like the last, it's like the fallback when nothing has worked, right? We are not able to send back a response using a regular server, regular handlers, and we send it back. So we need to add it here. So we would say router.use some error handler. So I would like to say middlewares.error handler. So const middlewares is require /middlewares. Right? So now just because we have it, what do you think will happen? So if I refresh this page, I still get an unhandled rejection promise. Right? My promise is still rejected. Even though I have a middleware defined, it's not being triggered. So how do I trigger the middleware? So I'm going to the post/id page. Right? So for the post/id route, how do I trigger that middleware?
You gotta add it after the ID.
I got to add it after the ID?
No, I mean, add it to the which middleware?
The error handler middleware, like this one. And actually, I don't even have an error page. So let's actually build that. So let's quickly say error.ejs. H1. Right, so something might happen. And I want to render this page every time something breaks. So how do I render this page now?
You have to put it on the route and then call next there.
Okay, so you want to put a catch on which line?
On line 16?
On line 16?
Yeah, after ID, after it comes. Can you handle this? Can you do the...
No, so that would be a middleware that would be executed before this function gets executed. I want to execute this middleware function when an error happens. When is an error happening in this case? What is throwing an error? Which promise is throwing an error?
Post find by ID.
Post find by ID, correct. So how do I handle an error when a promise throws an error? Right. So after the then, I need to have a .catch. Right. So that's basically going to get triggered when an error is thrown, and I get the error. All right. So what do I do now?
You have to call next with the error to pass it on to
right.
the middleware.
And next, where does next come from?
It comes from Express, so it's after the response.
Right. So I need to add next here, but I need to call next with the error.
Oh yeah.
Because that's the only way Express knows that this is going to execute the error handler function. Notice that the error handler function has 4 arguments. So if you call next without any arguments, it would execute only the middlewares that have 3 arguments. But because I'm calling it with another argument, it sort of figures out that you're trying to call the error handler function. So you call next with the error. Right, so now what do you think is going to happen when we refresh this page?
You'll get boo something happens.
Right? So now, what would happen if I go into the / page, the home page, posts?
It would still hang, right? Because you have to.
Right, it's still hanging because the only route that I've fixed is this route, the ID route. So how do I fix this route? I need to fix this out as well.
The same way?
Right, the same way. So I put a catch, and I have an error, and then I just call next of error.
Yeah, because it already has.
So if I go here, I get something. I didn't save the file. Okay. Right, so we get something bad happen. So that's pretty much what you do in every route. So every place where there is a possibility of failure, you have to handle an error. So you have to have a catch for the error. So that's it. So now when we restart Postgres, start Postgres. Refresh the page, and I get it back. So that's how you build an Express app. So I guess we couldn't get to the comments part, but I guess if we do that, it's going to take forever. So I'm going to stop here. So does anyone have any final thoughts, questions about this?
This is great.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I really clarified a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe we can also do like a continuation of this if that's helpful.
Yeah.
I can pull upon that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.